Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to look at auto increment in Power Apps. Now, in most cases, Power Apps are connected to data sources that could auto increment the various columns or any particular column inside the data source itself. But when you are using a data source like Excel, or you want to create your own kind of auto increment in the data source from inside Power Apps, there are various tricks that we may have to go through in order to achieve that purpose. So to get started, I have an Excel table. Let's look at it. So this is my Excel table that is connected to my Power Apps. I have two auto incrementing columns. I have ID with the numbering system 15, 16, 17, 18. Then I have another ID2, with a combination of text and then numbers, and that essentially makes this column a text field. So we have ABC 8, 9, ABC 11. So how do we achieve this auto incrementing numbering system and then auto incrementing numbering system with a prefix? So let's go to the Power Apps and see how we're able to achieve that. Okay, so this Power Apps is connected to the Excel table that I just showed. So on Edit, I have ID2 showing the last number 10. Then I also have the ID showing the numbering system as I showed you earlier in my Excel table. So to auto number the column with the real numbers that is following, that is quite straightforward. So what we are going to do is that in the default of the text property, we are going to insert or have a formula that will help us auto increment the 17, 18 so that the next number will be 19. So in the default property of the ID column, we can have this formula. If form 1, that is the name of my form, dot mode equals to FormMode.New. So that is if the form is new, or we are making new entries into the data source, then we want the last item to be increased by 1, or by whatever number that you auto increment your column in your data source. So if form1.mode equals to FormMode.New, that is if the form is a new form or is a form that is accepting new entries, then we are going to have last the ID column plus 1. Otherwise, Parent.Default. That is if the form is not a new mode or the form is an edit form, then we will not be incrementing the numbers. We will only show the existing number. That is Parent.Default. Okay, so the data source name, Okay, so we add the data source, that is the name of the data SL table. Or the ID column, ID. And that is it. So when we go to a new form, currently this is an edit mode. So when we go to a new mode, you should see that it has increased to 19. So the last digit in our ID column was 18. So it gives us the next line. Now the problem with this code is that you may face some delegation issues as far as last formula is concerned or the last function is concerned. So what we are going to do is to sort the data source such that the last items come first before we pick it, and then I increment it by 1. So in that case, we're going to sort the data source with the ID. Okay, so we sort the data source with the ID. Then having finished that, we pick the first item. Okay, so with this, we are sorting the data source using the ID column. So say that the last record or the last item on the ID column appears first. So are we setting it descending or ascending order? So we are going for the descending order. So the descending order means that the last item or the highest number appears first. So after it appears first, we pick the first row ID, then we increment it by 1. Okay, so with this, you are not going to face any delegation issues. No matter how tall or long the record, whether it goes beyond 2000 or not, this should work because sort is delegable. Okay, so we still have our formula incrementing it to 19. So that is how this one works, and it's quite pretty straightforward. Now, the main issue, we will look at the next item with prefix. Now, when we look at this gallery, let me extend it. When we look at this gallery, we have another prefix, or a prefix with ABC. This is ID column 2, as I shown in the SL table. So this ID, there is a prefix. And so when we have a prefix, it is very difficult to sort it. So when we look at this sorting, I am sorting the data source with ID2, and ID2 is the one with the prefix. It's essentially a text column, because it's a combination of text and numbers. And I am sorting it descending order. So essentially, the highest number should appear first. But when we look at this, we have 9, we are having 8, we are having 11, then we are having 10. So we see that it doesn't follow. Now to demonstrate further, when we change it to ascending order, we see that the 10 comes first, followed by 11, then followed by 8, and followed by 9. It doesn't follow. It's as if Power Apps is seeing 10 as 1, and it's seeing 11 as something else, followed by 8, and followed by 9. So with this, it's quite a different issue as compared to the one that follows with 17, 18, 19. Okay, so when I sort this one by the ID, instead of ID 2, you see that the numbers follow. We have 15, 16, 17, 18, unlike sorting it by the ID 2 column. So how do we deal with this? Okay, there are so many ways of dealing with auto numbering system where there's a prefix. So we are going to use two methods, or we are going to use two approaches to achieve that. So on our first approach, on visible, I am creating this variable, last ID. Then we are picking the last item from the ID2 column, and the ID2 column is the column that contains the prefix auto numbering, and I'm putting it back into the variable so we can reuse in our system. So then on the default of the text box, what we are going to do is to, when the form mode is new, we are joining ABC, which is the prefix that we'll be using, with the last of the splitted item. So in the first, we are going to split the ID, the last ID, and the last ID is the variable, into 2. So when we look at the split code or the split function, the split function converts a string into a tabular form. So it takes the text, in that case, it's representing our ABC, and then there is a separator, and the separator is a dash. So for instance, split apple, orange, bananas, we have this result: apple in the first row, second row orange, and then the third row is banana. So when we split the last ID, and the last ID in our case is ABC-11, we are going to have the ABC on the first row, and then the second row will be 11. So we split, then we pick the results, the last of the results, and then the last will be the 11. After that, we are multiplying the 11 by 1. Now we are multiplying the 11 by 1 because the 11 originally is a text data type. And so when we multiply it by 11, it converts the data type from text to a number. And then after that, we are incrementing by 1. Otherwise, we pick the Parent.Default. Okay, so we see that we are having 12 as our next item. Now the downside with this is that, first of all, on visible we have the last function being used, and the last may not necessarily be delegable. So you may want to sort and then pick the last number. And then sorting creates a problem when we have a prefix. For instance, let's have sort, and then we are sorting by the ID2. And then after, we are sorting descending order so that the last will appear first in order to beat delegation. Then after I've sorted descending order, we are picking the first because the last number will appear on the first. Then let's close our parentheses. Okay, so we see that when we sort descending order, and we can play the same thing on our form, on our diary, and let's see how it is. So when we sort the data source with ID2 descending order, Okay, let's look at the result. The result is that we have 9 beginning, we have 8 following, then we have 11, then we have 10, which doesn't make sense because we expect the 11 to appear first, followed by 10, 9, then 8. So it means that we are going to have issues with this particular type of formula. So how do you go about beating the delegation? If there is no delegation, then our first formula will be okay. So where there is a delegation, then we are going to have issue with it. So in that case, we are going to use another approach where you have delegation issues. If you don't have delegation issues, then this one will be okay. Okay, so when you have delegation issues, then I will ignore the unvisible formula and come up with a new code. So let's look at what this code is doing. The purpose of this code is to get the next number where there's a prefix auto numbering system. Okay, so let's format the text so that we get the code properly. Okay, so if for mode is new, we are joining ABC with, first of all, we are adding a column, a new column called new ID. Now in the new ID, we are placing this formula into the new ID column. Now what this formula is doing is that we are substituting the ID column where we have the ABC. So we are substituting the ABC dash with a blank column, or in other words, we are removing the ABC dash and then replacing it with blank. So wherever you see ABC dash 11, ABC dash 12, remove the ABC dash and leave and place a blank there. Now this formula will result in having only the numbers remaining, but because we have placed a blank there, we are going to trim. So when you trim the formula, it removes the space before or after the number, so we have the real number there. And because it is a text data type, we will be multiplying the results by 1 as we did earlier, so that we get a number, a real number data type. Then after we have gotten the number data type, what we are going to do is to sort. So after sorting, descending order, the last number, because this time it is a real number, the last number will appear first. Then after it has appeared first, we pick the first of the column and then increment that column by 1. Else, if it is an edit mode, we pick the Parent.Default. So the result is that we are having 12 as the next number, which is able to overcome delegation issues as well as the prefix issue of sorting. So to demonstrate the formula, as I said earlier, when we look at the sorting formula on our gallery, we are having the 9, 8, 11, and 10, which doesn't make sense. But when we place the new code that we generated from our form to demonstrate how the descending order will work this time, after placing it, and when we look at the gallery, we see that the 11 appears first, followed by 10, followed by 9, and followed by 8, which is the natural order of how numbers flow, and it demonstrates that it works both for prefix issues and for delegation issues on any data source that you use, because the sort formula is delegable. I hope this was useful. Thank you.